Maiden is a documentary about the first all-female racing team in the Whitbred Around the World yacht race. It used to be a boys' club. The only positions for women in the race were that of cooks. TRACY Edwards, she served as a cook for a men's crew and then decided to lead her own all-female crew, which ended up eventually capturing the attention of the world. What was the final straw that pushed you to do that?
Well, sailing around the world with 17 men over 9 months was, well, I survived, but, I did get to the end and think there must be better ways to sail around the world than this. Mainly the sort of driving, the motivation for putting Maiden together was that I knew I would never be allowed to be a navigator on a men's boat. So to be a navigator and also to prove that women could do this race and do it successfully, I had to put my own team together, and that was Maiden.
Now, everyone comes up with ideas and, they talk to their friends. One day I'm going to start a business. I'm going to go see the world. I'm going to go do this. Most of the time, those ideas are fantasy and people don't actually follow through with them. When you first had the idea of putting together a team of female sailors, did it seem realistic or did it just seem like one of those, I'm going to do this one day?
I think the 80s were a time of a feeling that you could do stuff, that you, I didn't have any qualifications. It was a time, I think, where you felt you could just make stuff up and, sort of just go along with it and make it happen. Or youthful ignorance, as I think I should possibly call it. I mean, my mum did say to me, look, you've never stuck at anything in your life. And while that's fine when it's just you, if you've got 12 other people's dreams in your hands, you have to follow through. And I think that was that stuck in my mind for a long time. And the other thing really that I think kept me going through everything we went through was that I thought, if we fail, the next all-female crew that comes along is not just going to have to prove they can do it. They're going to have to get over our failure. We'll be an albatross around their necks kind of thing. So those two things really made sure that it would happen.
How much of that pressure were you feeling? Was that like a constant thing that, oh man, if we screw this up?
Yeah, I think it was. I don't know if it was necessarily fear of failure, or maybe at the beginning it was. I think it was, I found a whole competitive side to my nature that I hadn't realised that I had. And, I realised when we launched the project, I thought, blimey, I really want to win this. And that became my absolutely driving force. And of course, it was so funny because the rest of the people in the race and a lot of people beyond sort of saw us as this sort of freak show, I think, really. And of course, we saw ourselves as really serious competitors and people who were out to win the race, and it was quite a juxtaposition between the two groups of people.
Now, you mentioned the 80s, and you grew up basically 60s, 70s, kind of right in the middle of the civil rights movement, and then in the 80s when you're putting this team together, you had the U.S. had our first female Supreme Court justice, first female vice presidential candidate, first female NASA astronaut, Jackie Joyner Kersee, starting to bring attention to female Olympic sports. Women, starting to get jobs in record numbers here. The idea of the stay-at-home wife was kind of starting to fade out at that point. You grew up in England. I assume this kind of same movement was going on over there at that time too, right?
Well, it was. And, my mother was, sort of a very much independent, strong woman who, when my father died, brought my brother and I up on her own for a while. And I think I probably did have a sense of that change that was going on. And again, that sense that nothing's impossible, that we can really follow our dreams and get out there and do things. And I think that really was a time when that was happening.
Did you realize that, you were kind of part of a bigger thing, or did it just feel kind of like a really isolated, like, hey, we're going to put a female team together for sailing? And I mean, did you see that all this other stuff was going on at the same time?
I think we probably did feel quite isolated to start off with, and because we were very insular, I think we were just looking at, we want to be the first all-female crew to ever sail around the world, and we want to win this race. And, so we had our list of, we all had a list of achievements, I think, that we wanted to do. I don't think it was really until we started getting into port, and there'd be sort of hundreds, thousands of people with Maiden banners and, sort of in New Zealand, we were treated like gods, which was a little bit weird. And then finishing back into the UK, with 50,000 people on the dock waiting to see us in. I think that's when we thought, well, okay, this is a bit bigger than us. But then it's interesting, actually, what the film has done for me 30 years later is it's given me the opportunity to feel very proud of what we did, whereas I spent quite a long time being, women, we have this imposter syndrome thing, and we're like, oh no, it was nothing really, we do this sort of just shrugging things off thing that my daughter keeps telling me off for. And so what the film has done for me is it's given me, I think, the motivation to hold my head high and say, I'm really proud of what we did. I think it was an amazing achievement.
What was that like? I mean, leaving port and everybody's kind of, maybe not outright mocking you, but, they're expecting you to fail. And then you show up in port and you've got all these people cheering you. Like, it's such a difference.
Yeah, it was interesting when, of course, we left the UK and all the yachting journalists were in the pub making bets on how far we would get, whether we'd actually get to the first stopover or whether we'd all die. And then, of course, winning the second leg coming into Australia, of course, the difference between the two thought processes was just so extreme. But I do have to say, to the credit of the guys in the race and some of the yachting journalists, they really did change their minds as we went round. We felt we were achieving, we were getting them to look at us in a different way. And for me, that was a sort of a huge thing. And Bob Fisher, who is now one of my dearest friends, at the time wrote, they're just a tin full of tarts. And then when we came first into New Zealand and were leading the fleet at the halfway point, he wrote in his article, not just a tin full of tarts, a tin full of smart, fast tarts.
Now that you guys are good friends, like, how often do you bug him about that? Going, tin full of tarts, huh?
Well, it's funny actually, because when we've just rescued Maiden, a couple of years ago, we rescued Maiden. I had to sell her after the race. We rescued her from a watery grave. We've restored her. But when we brought her back to the UK on a ship, and she was sort of towed into the marina where we were going to do the work on her, Bob Fisher turned up, and he arrived in his Sunday best suit. He's got 2 new hips, 2 new knees, and he could barely walk. And he came down to the dock and he said, he did have a tear in his eye, and he said, Tracy, I can't believe I'm here for this very special day. And then he said, can we do an interview? So I said, yeah, sure, Bob. So we sit down and he looked at me and he said, now then, tell me about girls' education. And I looked at him and I said, Bob, you have come a long way. And he said, I had a good teacher. And it was just, for me, that said so much about what we had achieved, actually.
It had to be an amazing moment just seeing, such a turn.
Yeah,
wow.
It has. There are still things that, there's still a way to go, but so many of us have a long way to go in our struggles and, our fight for justice. So, it's a process, it's ongoing, but I look at the next generation of young women and I'm blown away by how amazing they are.
One of the things that I found most interesting about this documentary, it's an old interview that you did, and, you just start and put the team together, and someone asked if you're a feminist, and yeah, you kind of scoffed at it and went, I hate that word, and then you went on to kind of describe being a feminist.
I know, it's hysterical, isn't it?
What did that mean to you at the time?
Well, at the time, in the 80s, 90s, that word had been made into a really nasty word. And, it was used as an accusation, not a compliment, that's for sure. And in that interview, I'm 23 years old and I just want people to like me. I don't want people using horrible words about me. So, yeah, and then you're right, I go on to describe that. In fact, I am a feminist. And I think during the race, we felt confident enough to take that word back. And again, I look at my daughter's generation, and it is a compliment, and it's powerful. And boys will say, yeah, I'm feminist. I agree in fairness and equality. And so many, we get dads on the boat who've seen the film and they say, oh, thank you so much. I have daughters. And, I love this sort of new wave of what's happening and this feeling of optimism, I think.
Did your kids, growing up, did they realize what you had done?
Well, I just had one daughter, and Maiden's always been, she calls Maiden my firstborn. So Maiden's always been around and all the other sailing projects I did, and she's actually been on quite a few of the boats before I retired with all female crews, and so she's kind of known about it. But it's only now we've rescued Maiden and we're sailing her around the world again, raising money for girls' education. She's now working on the shore crew. She runs our events, and I think it really has become a reality to her now, and she sees and hears people come down to the boat, and we have people sobbing when they see the boat, and people going, "Oh my God, is that really the boat from the film?" And you're like, "Yes, it is." And so I think she really now has seen the magic of Maiden, I think.
In regards to the Maiden documentary, obviously you and your team, you're the subject of the documentary, but how involved were you in the making of the actual film?
Not a huge amount. I mean, I did steer Alex in the direction of some of the footage. I mean, my mum, God bless her soul, videoed everything. And so he went through all the videos, everything she collected. She collected every single thing in newsprint. So they had a sort of a trail, if you like, to work from. And they sort of worked backwards from that. And it took them 2 years to find that footage, which is quite extraordinary. That was a real labour of love. I mean, I told them the story and I guided them, but then really, they put the documentary together. And I think what was very clever about what Alex did was he didn't let us see the footage he'd found before he interviewed us. So those interviews are complete memories. And he was actually blown away by how much we remembered that was very similar, that we all sort of pretty much told the same story from different angles. But, the way they did it, I think, was very smart, and he's a great storyteller, and there are New Bat Films is a great documentary making production company.
I was actually surprised at how much video there was, because these days everybody's got cell phones with cameras. There's little action GoPro cameras you can mount everywhere. Pro quality video cameras are cheap and affordable. None of that existed when you ladies raced. I mean, no. Your mom shot all this, or?
No, my mum videoed everything on television.
Okay.
So all the news programs, anything that we were on, she videoed, with a video recorder. And the stuff on the boat we filmed. So we filmed ourselves. So Jo, the cook, who didn't do a watch, we basically gave her a camera and said, "Right, film everything."
So it was like a big kind of bulky VHS recorder?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. It was called an SP4, I think it was SPV4 or something. It didn't last very long, this particular type of film. But yeah, and we had a camera attached to the radar mast, and we were the only boat that had that, which is how we've got the amazing Southern Ocean footage.
How long were you guys actually at sea?
Well, the race is 9 months, and out of that 9 months, we were at sea for 167 days.
In the documentary, we're seeing an hour and a half. Everything's really intense, but there's got to be just a lot of time of just sitting there staring at the ocean, right?
Oh, yeah. They say that sailing is 99% boredom interspersed by 1% sheer terror, which is a very good description. Or standing under a cold shower tearing up £50 notes is another good description. Or an expensive way of going nowhere for free. There's lots of ways you can describe sailing, but... yeah, I mean, of course, women talk a lot. So we talked pretty much for 9 months around the world. And, when we had to do the sailing bit, we did the sailing bit.
Is there anything that you think people should know about Maiden, the documentary, the ship, you? I mean, what do you think people need to know the most?
Well, I hope people go to the film and walk away with a sense of enthusiasm and the feeling that, anyone... that you put your mind to it, you can get out there and do it. Life is messy and it doesn't go to plan, but if you keep going, something will ultimately happen. And if people want to know about what Maiden's doing now, with the another amazing all-female crew on the boat raising money for girls' education, then they can go to themaidenfactor.org and they can follow our trip around the world.